Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Business of Art, the podcast that demystifies business for artists. And today we have a twofer. We have on the program Gwendolyn Dreyer and Nicholas Doan from Monster Elementary. Monster Elementary is an amazing kid-friendly anthology about 5 monsters who are forced to go to a normal public elementary school. It's currently being published by Space Goat, but they did put 1.5 volumes together by themselves through the success of 2 $20,000 a piece Kickstarters. Plus, they're just awesome indie creators who are full of value. And to top it all off, Nick has a story in my new anthology, Monsters and Other Scary Shit, running on Kickstarter now. Check it out at monsteranthologycomic.com. Because it's awesome. It's 224 pages of monster goodness. Cute monsters, scary monsters, funny monsters, sci-fi monsters, fantasy monsters, and more. Check it out at monsteranthologycomic.com today. While the campaign is going on, you can spend $40 and get a hardcover copy of the book, a digital download of the cover, and the PDF of the book. And there's no shipping charges domestically. That's right, $40 gets you all of that, including the book, shipped right to your door. So check it out at monsteranthologycomic.com today. With that being said, let's get on with the show. Take it away, Nick and Gwen. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
Well, I'm passionate about good comics and independent comics. I'm very passionate about not big 2 events and weird junk like that just kind of kills stories. And of course, I'm passionate about monsters.
I'm really, in regards to the comics community, I'm really passionate about, like Nick said, focusing on indie comics and making sure that independent creators have the chance to tell their stories. I'm really worried about what we're seeing in the comics blogs about, how the industry bubble is bursting. And, I look at the dichotomy of the industry and the big companies and the retailers saying the industry's bursting. And all I see is indie comics for miles around. And I'm passionate about wanting to find a way to connect that cognitive disconnect that the industry is dying when there's more wealth of content than there has ever been before.
Yeah, and more people. Well, I mean, from my point of view, like people more interested in buying indie comics, and to me that bubble burst is great because that bubble is like the mainstream. People are sick of mainstream stuff, but they still love comics, so like they're reading indie stuff more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. This is our opportunity to really come in and fulfill a need that the bigger companies and retail. I mean, I would never bash retailers. We've had several retailers that have been very supportive to us when other retailers have said no. So I would never bash the industry as a whole. With that being said, there's clearly a need and a void that people are looking to be filled, and we need to find a way collectively as the indie comics community to step up and fill that void.
Yeah, the trick is finding out how to get the product to the people. That's where our industry is kind of weird and cut off. And so we go, too. We go to conventions and people are there and they want it and they're looking for it, but the product itself is not going to them.
Yeah, because you're not marketing the product at the end of the day to well, for me, I go direct to customer. I really don't have many distributors. But for me, when I look at like a Space Goat or a Archaea or a Marvel or DC, like they're really marketing to retailers.
Right.
And if the retailers are like, I don't know about this title, or I've never heard of this title before, they're not going to buy it, so it's not going to be in front of fans who are then going to buy it and tell them to buy more indie comics. I mean, I think I read a stat that said 300 stores in this country are responsible for 80% of independent comic sales.
Yeah.
I believe that.
And I would believe that too.
But it's so crazy because I go to a show not even a big show, like let's say a Long Beach Comic Con, which still has a few thousand people, but it doesn't have San Diego numbers, and there's a very healthy percentage of those people which are roaming, looking, and hungry for indie comics.
Right.
Yeah. Long Beach Comic Con is one of our better shows. We sell really well there.
Yeah, the disparity we see between our San Diego sales and all of our smaller sales, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating study in who goes, which comics fans go to what show. Like, you know what I mean? Like I am not a statistics person. I am not a data analyzer necessarily, but like, it's fascinating to exhibit at smaller shows and exhibit at the big show and see who we sell to, how often we sell to, in what quantity we sell to. Yeah. It's yeah.
even Long Beach, they do the show twice a year, and we go over and over and over again and still sell consistently at the show. There's no dip because of the same people are coming.
Yeah, because what happens, at least to me at shows, is like I'll talk to somebody one show, and then like they'll actually look at my book the next show. Then they'll like actually go to my website the third show, and by like the fourth or fifth show, they're like, "Fuck, dude! All right, I'll buy the book. All right, finally." Does that happen to you guys too?
Absolutely, we see it a lot. Especially because we do a all ages book. Parents buying for kids. I mean, there's obviously similar marketing tactics to selling to an adult who's buying for themselves versus selling to an adult who's buying for a child. But a lot of times parents are very circumspect with what they want their children to read, what they want their children to be exposed to. In addition to the fact, when you're buying an indie comic for your child, you're paying a lot more than you are for that DC trade at your local comic shop because it's a smaller print run. There's not enough money backing it. We can't take a giant loss in the way a big company can make, and we're not funneling, we don't see the comic books as a lead to an animation show. Like we're not willing, what I mean? The company may not just be setting out to break even or take a loss with the idea that it's going to feed their television show.
Right.
So our prices have to be, just because they need to be, are higher than if they bought that DC Superhero Girls book, and parents are they're going to take their time to decide if this is something they're willing to invest with for their child.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see that all the time. In fact, I was at a couple of shows this year where they place. So I do a lot of shows a year. For anyone that doesn't know that listening, like I do 40 shows last year, and I'll probably do 40 or 50 this year. And it's interesting how when my table is placed towards the front before the dealers, people tend to be more willing to spend $20 or $30 on a book than when it's placed at the back behind the dealers, because now if I'm behind the dealers, they've seen the $5 omnibuses and the $10 like set of 100 comic books. Then they get back to my table and it's like, wait, this is $30. I could go get 120 Spider-Man, which is 10 years of Spider-Man for the same $30. I don't know, man. That seems overpriced.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face as indie creators is educating the public on why our book, we think we sell our book at conventions for $20, and it's 97, volume 1 and 2, like one of them's 92 pages, one of them's 94. And for independent creators that we're not the artists, we have, I'm just an editor and Nick is just a writer. We have to pay artists to work on the book. There's the printing cost, etc. For what we're doing, a $20 ask for 90-something pages of content isn't that much money. But, to educate the average comic consumer who doesn't know how the industry works, doesn't care how the industry works, we could very much appear to them like we're taking them for a ride. So education, I think, is really key in converting. You'll always have those comic fans that know more than the average consumer, and they get it when they see that. And we even see parents buying it for their kids who get it, and they're looking for independent books to give to their kids, and they have no problem. Like, there'll be plenty of people that'll have no problem shelling out $20 for a 90-something independent trade. They're just happy to have something that's not superheroes to give to their kid. But for those other people, it's an education process, and that's where I think the disparity in marketing money comes in. DC and Marvel have all the marketing money in the world. We we spend so much money on just simply bringing our products to the market that we don't have the extra marketing money as indies on our own to educate the public. I would love to see some sort of union's not the right word since most of us are working for ourselves, but some sort of independent organization, like Comics Pros for the retailers.
Right.
I would love to see something similar for indie comics, or we could, pull together whatever resources we have, whether the resources are money or whether the resources are connections or just simply amplifying each other's voices and finding a way to start educating the public.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is sort of an interesting switch in the past couple of years, because it seemed like a couple of years ago there was this big, the industry as a whole, independent comics, I'm not talking about all comics, was very much like if you get a sale, then that's a sale I don't get. Which
Right.
I never kind of understood. It's like, no, this is an indie comics person. If they're going to buy from you, they're probably going to buy from everybody in this fucking place if you have something that's cool for them. So, like, people love to buy things, and I've seen this switch in the past couple of years where people are more, like, wanting to do co-ops or wanting to do, like, have an image model or some other model where everybody is working together. Because if you work together and you can get 100 people in and all of those 100 people buy from one of the 5 of you, that's really good, as opposed to you only being able to service maybe 5 or 10 of that 100 people with your own work.
Yeah, Nick and I were theater majors in college, and that's how we both got our starts in the arts. Nick actually has had he's also a playwright, member of the Dramatists Guild Union, and has had some plays produced. And across the arts board together, I would argue that you see that sort of competitiveness going, where people don't want to give other people a leg up because they're afraid the jobs are so few and far between to the amount of people that want those jobs. They lock down their little group, whoever they make art with, and they don't want to let people in, and they don't want to expand beyond that. But I have to argue, and correct me if I'm wrong, either of you, but I feel like the comics industry kind of takes that to the 10th level. Like, Nick had an internship with a professional company in college for a summer. There are companies, in ballet, you have your lowest level, and the idea is you work your way through the ranks. So you're always hiring at that low level to feed the upper levels. And where is that in the comics industry? Like, I don't see anything like that across the board.
The comics industry, just almost in every sense, is never designing to feed itself for the future. It's always like focused on what we can do right now, this moment. It's the same thing with their big event comics. They're like, how can we sell 100,000 comics this month? We don't care about next month when people are sick of all this and stop buying. They don't think about, how they can engage new readers. They just want the readers they have now to read more. And they don't think about getting new creators because they've already got too many. So yeah, I agree with you. Comics industry as a whole just does not look to the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, honestly, most businesses lack long-term strategic planning, but I think comics even more so, and that's because, the readership has been down, and so instead of going, well, why is readership down, and they say, well, how about I do 20 variant covers and make you buy all 20
Right.
and 30 other things, which is one of the reasons why, why I prefer independent comics. I mean, not the only reason, but there's also a massive lack of long-term planning in indie comics, but at least you're getting something that's a little more pure than the ridiculous marketing strategy that goes into a Marvel run, where their strategy should be, how do I expand this market into all people so I can be in bookstores and sell 1 million copies like I used to. It's how do I get that one person to buy 50 variants of a copy and 37 other issues in order to get the complete story.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a boggling thing to see you losing your audience, a company losing their audience and doing exactly what you say, which instead of figuring out how to get that audience member back, figuring out how to get the audience member they have to spend more, which, I mean, I mean, you see that across the board in entertainment industry all over the place. In IMAX, people can't afford to go to the movies, so now they do all these like major IMAX 3D presentations where if you buy a certain package, you get a poster and an action figure at the time you see it. It's not an uncommon strategy to move in that direction, but I think it's very short-sighted, and you can't. I mean, the comic book world it is high art. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying on an artistic level it's high art. With that being said, a $3 comic book is much less expensive to go see a theater show. So comic books were designed to be a method of bringing storytelling to the masses on a way that people could afford, and that kids could take their allowance to the corner store and afford as well. And so this idea that they're trying to turn the market towards we just need half as many people to spend twice as much, and then we'll still make the same amount of profit. Like I find that as an antithesis to what the industry should be as a whole.
Yeah, if we can sell them for less to more people, that's a much better way to go about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just reminded me. I mean, as a kid, I used to go to 7-Eleven to get my comic books, and each comic book cost about the same as a candy bar. And nowadays, you're paying 3 times as much as a candy bar.
Yeah, I think there's a place for the premium, like $30 hardcover, obviously, because that's my business, is $30 and above books. But the thing that upsets me about like major mainstream comics is the thing that they're doing is the thing that's driving people away. So like these big event things that, for instance, for me, like I bought a Batgirl trade, and I read it, and I kind of like I know all the characters, so like I understood what was going on in the place that it was the New 52 and it was the Batgirl of Burnside, so I really wanted to read it. Then I handed it to my wife, and she's like, "What the hell is going on in this book?" And I was like, "Oh, well, that's Black Canary, and this is this other character, and she used to be this other thing, and like then I was like, the people can't ever come in. Like, there's no new entry point, regardless of whether you say, we're gonna reboot the thing. There's people still read the old stuff, and then like you get pissed off. So I'm like, I just read this New 52 thing that I really wanted, and that storyline is gone now." Or you have people that love comics and are like, I'm not buying 20 different things, so they abandon it. So like the thing that it's weird because the thing that they're doing is literally the thing that's driving them out of business. And instead of like redesigning the thing, they're doubling down on it, making things to go longer, like making people making the exodus from those kind of comics even more so. I mean, and I can see it from my books are all single volume stories. They're all books, and people go, "Oh, thank Christ," because I hate Marvel. How they do this all the time.
Yeah, yeah. People just want a story. We have people come up to our booth all the time who want to know which one's issue 1. I mean,
which one's the first one?
Right. We have 2 volumes, and so the question is which volume is the first one, and we'll tell them, but we'll make it clear to them that there's no, if your kid likes the cover of that one better or likes the idea of the stories in volume 2 better, you shouldn't get them. Yeah, you shouldn't get them one just because you think it's the first. We don't run it like that, Yeah, there's an 8-page origin story in the first book, but that's for free on our website. We put that story up for free, and beyond that, I mean, that's the beauty of us doing anthology style, where everything is a short story. Every short story in the book has a beginning, middle, and end. And as long as you know that these kids are monsters going to a human public school, you're set. Yep. Like, that's all you need to know. And it's sad. I mean, yeah. And then exactly. Now we can talk about young readers, about how it's not just isolating their old-time adult readers. How do you expect parents to get their kids into comic books when you have to sit them down and have basically the talk, but about what Black Canary's history is or what Batgirl's history is to try to get them caught up?
Yeah, when I think about getting caught up, too, I always think about X-Men, because what could be more complicated than all of these relationships and all of these characters and how many times they've died?
Yes, and come back. And it's just... I totally agree. That's what... So... we talked about Marvel. We beat that dead horse. I want to talk about something else that you said, which is talking about anthologies and why anthologies are so cool. What made you decide to do an anthology instead of doing a long form story?
I'll let Nick take this one, since he was actually, I didn't come into this process until we were getting very close to print stage, but it was a combination of necessity and desire, when the desire didn't come until a little bit later after the necessity came.
Well, I mean, it was always, originally it was going to be a webcomic, was our original idea with Monster Elementary, and I'm a huge Peanuts fan, and I always loved going back and reading the old Peanuts strips that, you know, each day it would kind of continue on a larger story, and so the idea of doing, you know, one page a day and it would build to a little bit bigger of a story was really cool to me, and to kind of keep doing that. So it was always, originally, I mean, if you actually go back and read that first story, you can kind of tell how each page was meant to end on a little bit of a punch and build to the next page for the next day. So yeah, I mean, it was always meant to be just like chunks that went out onto the internet. And then when it became a book, it was, you know, already a couple of stories were written, a couple of like one-page goofs. So that was sort of always there in the genesis of it. And it was also because I really kind of always loved short stories like that, you know, getting to play with the characters just a little bit of time here and there. Some of my favorite comics from when I was a kid was like the Superman family comics and the Batman family comics, which, you know, they were just built up of all these short stories with all the different, you know, side characters from the universe, like, you know, Batgirl, and there'd be Commissioner Gordon stories and all kinds of cool stuff like that, and, you know, wacky team-up stories. They might even do a story with one of the villains as the star.
You should talk a little bit about the artist, too, because although the story format, of course, is the definition of why it's an anthology, but I think the fact that you have different artists all over the different stories is what probably the average person considers it an anthology.
Yeah, and that was the absolute moment when I was like, this is going to work, we're going to do this. Was a friend of mine, Jeremy Love. He did a Fraggle Rock story for Archaea. And so I picked up the book and I took a look at it. Well, my wife's a Muppet nut, so we were going to buy it anyway. But it helped that our friend was in it. And I looked at it, and there was all different stories with all different artists, and they all had very different takes on the absolute same characters. And every story, they looked like the characters, but they all had their own look on it, and it was beautiful. And I loved, you know, looking at a comic book with all these different artists with their own styles, and to me, that's the soul of independent comics, is having style, doing something unique and interesting, which you're not allowed to do at DC with their house style. And it was that book that I read, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh my God, we can do this, and it will be so awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, from the business standpoint, you know, you can go, listeners can go to our website and read our whole long story of how long it took us to get this book to market and the whole history with different artists on and off the project. But when you are an independent creator, editor, published, you know, whatever you want to call Nick and I, independent creators, and you don't draw, it is very difficult to come up with the money to pay all your artists, or pay one artist to work on it, and to get one artist who's not an owner in the property to devote enough time at an indie comics budget to do that for you is difficult. But if you ask people that, if you send them the script and they love it and they want to be a part of it, but they cannot devote the time it's going to take to do 90 pages at an indie comics artist rate, you know, you can say, hey, can you do 3 pages? Hey, can you do 20 pages? Can you do 10 pages? And you can just work, you know, and that's business-wise. That's one of the reasons why we decided that anthology was the way to go. Because we knew we could get the level of artists we wanted, and we could get the specific artists we wanted, if we could just somehow find a way to lower the page count that they had to contribute.
Yeah, I love that about anthologies, and thank you for mentioning that, because it's probably the number one thing that I loved about anthologies, because, like, I'm never going to work with all of these people for 97 pages or 100 pages. This is not going to happen, like, realistically. Like, I know my margins. I ain't going to happen unless, like, some massive company buys me out and like wants me to do like a full line of books, like me, Russell Nolte as one human, is never going to work on all of this stuff. But when I put the anthology call out, it was like, hey, can you do one somewhere between 1 and 15 pages? That's all I'm looking for. Like, you do like really format's cool, whatever you want to do. Just like, I want to work with you. Like, you want to hook it up, whatever you're comfortable doing. And like, that was way easier to get than the artist I have working on my book now, where we're a year into it and he hasn't finished 44 of the 88 pages.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. It's frustrating on the editorial side to see that, but you can't get too frustrated because you know what it's like to be an artist. You know what the commitment is from an artist to take on an independent book at an independent comics rate and ask them to do 90-something pages. You know what that means. You know all that stuff. So yeah, it can be frustrating to sit back and wait, but you can't blame them too much, if at all.
No, you can't blame them at all because hey, if DC comes or Simpsons comes and says, hey, you want to do a book and I'll pay you $250, $300, whatever they pay a page, $500 a page, and you're like, I can pay you $100, stretch it, but I can pay you $100, and they're like, well, I love your thing, but I love eating also.
Right, and that's a big thing. We've run a Kickstarter for each of the 2 volumes. We're currently thinking about the 3rd Kickstarter to fund the 3rd volume, and it's hard. It's hard to educate. Like we were talking about, education is key when it comes to indie comics. It can be really difficult when you're running late on your Kickstarter book and you're like trying to explain. My job is like, as the publisher, like my artist is working as fast as they can, as humanly possible, like trying to overcome those delays to your audience base and explain why it is the way it is. And you have people who private message you and are like, we should just fire that artist, and you're like, no, I absolutely should not fire that artist. They're doing what they need to do to keep a roof over their heads. So no, it's not that simple. Like, yeah, education is, educating people about the indie comics process is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, for sure. But I've never had that specific issue because all my books have gone to Kickstarter, like fully edited, fully done, just needing print funds. So I could not imagine the other side of it, where like you're raising the money and then like you have the money and then you have to like fulfill it, and like it takes a long time. Like that's why I've never done it that way. It must be so it is. And believe you me, if we had the stockpile of funds, we would pay the artists first and then launch the Kickstarter. Absolutely, that's the best way to do it if you can do it.
We should launch a pre-Kickstarter.
What?
We'll launch a Kickstarter to fund our Kickstarter. and then we can have the real Kickstarter.
I don't even know what to say to you right now.
Then we'll be done.
I don't even know.
The actual Kickstarter will be great because we'll be like, look, we've already got the funds to fund the Kickstarter. We just need you to fund the book.
Yeah, I mean, good grief. But it is like we before we launched the first Kickstarter for the first book, we sought out the advice of I won't say the name because it wasn't like they wanted publicity from it or anything, but a pretty prominent comic book creator who does a lot of Kickstarter projects was really nice and really mentored Nick a lot through the process of his first Kickstarter. And he said to him to have the art done first before you go to Kickstarter. Because
if you can.
Because the Kickstarter people don't like to wait. And we were just like, wow, that would be a lovely idea.
Thank you for the advice.
That would be lovely if that was the way it could work. But the thing is if you do a good job of education and you really keep your Kickstarter backers informed, like we post some pretty long updates on Kickstarter, and we don't really pull the punches. Like if we're delayed, we just tell them we're delayed, and we'll say where we are in the process and why there is a delay. We protect our artists as much as humanly possible because we don't want to pass the buck. We don't want our backers starting to blame our artists for, that's not what we want. But we'll say, we're waiting on art. and that will be what we say about it. And we'll say we have done everything we possibly can to get this book to print, except we're just waiting on the final pages. And there's, I cannot speed that process up. We cannot speed that process up, and we're doing our best, and our artists are doing their absolute best. And we just ask for your patience. And 9 times out of 10, and even more than that, probably 99 out of 100, most people are like, I just can't wait to get more. I'm so excited. But you do every once in a while get that one dude or girl, let's be fair. I use dude generally, but, dude or gal who you just want to be like, I'm so sorry. I can't meet your expectation. I don't know what else to say to you. This is where we are.
Yeah, your Kickstarter backers, they want the product, and they're eager and excited, and they don't want to wait longer, but most of the time, if you communicate properly and fully, then they're pretty forgiving.
Yeah, they can smell a lie a mile away. I would never lie. I'm too honest of a person. You can ask Nick, to my detriment. I'm sometimes more honest than I should be, but Kickstarter backers can smell a shenanigan or a lie a mile away, and I watch other Kickstarters that go up, and they have delays, and you can just see the spin. You can see the spin in the words that they published, and you're just like, that's not going to do well for you. And then you watch the comment section blow up, and you're just like, you can't do that, man. When people give you their money in faith that you will produce the product that they want, you can't lie to them. Like, I just don't understand these people that lie.
And we always try to give what we can. When sometimes we have completed stories. We'll go, here's a completed story that you can download right now before we finish the book. We throw up pencils and things when they're available so they can see where we're at in the process. Yeah,
giving them things to know that you didn't just take their money and run away is good. And also, some people, it's funny. We did on our very first Kickstarter, we released an 8-page story on Halloween because the book wasn't out yet, and so we just said, here's an 8-page, Happy Halloween, here's an 8-page story PDF. And I was shocked at how many people didn't download it and didn't read it. Like, we'd have fans come up to us at booth, we'd be boothing or promoting or something, and they'd be like, oh, what, they'd just simply meet us on the convention floor, and they'd be like, oh, I'd be like, oh, did you like the story? And they're like, oh, I didn't read it. And I'd be like, oh, really? And they'd be like, yeah, I want to wait for the book. Or some people were like, I don't like PDFs. Or they're like, it's just cool. Like, we appreciate it. So we know, like, there's stuff, but, like, we're going to wait. We're going to wait for it. So, yeah, you just have to make sure they know that there's progress being made.
I love that thing that you said about they just want to know that you did it. Like, I sent out 500 free copies of the PDF to people, whether it's creators or old Kickstarter backers, for the anthology. And, like, I don't expect 20 of them to download it and read it. But it's not about that. It's about the fact that you sent it and you put the goodwill out there,
right?
So people recognize the goodwill you put out, even if they don't accept, like, even if they don't download the thing or do the thing. Like, that's why I have no problem giving all the advice in the world out, because probably ain't no one gonna take it. But people remember that the advice is going out there. Even if they all took it, I would still put it out. But, like, I've been doing this a long time. My friends have been doing this a long time. Like, maybe one of every 1,000 people that you talk to and give advice to will do the advice that you tell them. But all 1,000 of them will, like, be appreciative that you gave them the advice.
Right.
So I want to get into doing these top 5 tips. But first, I'm real nervous about this Kickstarter coming up, this $20,000 one that I'm going to run. And as someone in the trenches who's done a $20,000 Kickstarter, and is part of this anthology book also, what was your secret to get the 20,000? Because that's a big number.
It's huge.
Yeah, I think the real key is having a larger network. Because when you do an anthology, you have so many more people that worked on the book that can help you promote it. So, I mean, obviously there's no point at which you're going to relax and not feel stress about it. But I think the fact that there are so many more people that worked on it, and there are so many more people that are engaged with those creators, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's where the anthology structure of the book really comes into play. We had a lot of people on both books that we had. Some of our artists didn't promote it at all. Some of our artists, you could tell that there was no revenue coming in from their participation on the book, and that's totally fine. We don't expect that. We don't say that's a necessary part of the component. We're just happy to have their contributions to the book. With that being said, when we saw the pledges come in, we definitely could tell that some of those pledges were from family members, from our or friends of our people. You know, you get to see, as a Kickstarter runner, you get to see, I mean, some of it's more general than you'd like it to be, but it tracks, like, where those links came from that people found. Did they do a direct search on the website? Did they come from monsterelementary.com? Did they come from facebook.com? Did they come from Twitter? Did they come from this, that? And so you can kind of see where your traffic comes in. And I think mobilizing your contributors to the book is a huge advantage to trying to get to that 20,000 number. The other thing I would say that's key to that 20,000 number is it doesn't matter how much you earn in your first day. It doesn't matter how close you think you are to your goal. Never act like you're actually going to make it. Like, and I know that's a weird thing to say, but like every day you should be behaving like it's the last day of the campaign, and you need every single pledge you can get. If you spend one day not asking people for money, then you're one day behind. You know what I mean? You need to think about it like a marathon, not like a sprint at the beginning and a sprint at the end, like so many other people do. If you have a $5,000 campaign, you can probably get away with that. But when you're asking for that much money and you don't have celebrity to your name, every day you're running.
Yeah. For sure. I totally, oh man, just so much. It's so much. Yeah. And the thing is, I've been at shows and people have, with the book, and people have asked me like, well, the book is here, like, why can't I just buy why are you gonna do a Kickstarter campaign if I can buy the book? And I have to be like, well, that book is softcover and it would cost you $80 to buy it, because that's like, in order for me to make any money, that would have to be an $80 book. So like, if you don't want to fund the Kickstarter and it doesn't get funded, you're right, it'll come out. It'll cost you $80, but you will be able to buy it all over the place if you want to. But if you want it to like be beautiful and like cost $40, then like this is this other thing, and like that's really like I ran the numbers like $3. I was like, maybe I can do it for 10, maybe I can do it for 8, maybe I can do it for 12, and like trick yourself, you're like, oh, I can always do it for less, but then you're like, oh wait, fuck, I forgot Kickstarter fees. The shipping's not going to be that cheap, and it just kept ballooning up, and it's like at the end of the day, in order to do the book in the right way, you need that much money, and like the previous books had already been paid for, so I didn't really need that. I mean, I had already eaten the cost, I should say.
Right.
So like I needed much less. The books were smaller, so like I could do an $8,000 campaign, but this one, the books like both books put together, and it's much more expensive to print. It's much more expensive to ship. It's much more expensive to do the things that you want to do. And so, like, you look at that number and it's like, all right, well, I better be able to activate this massive network that I've been spending a decade accumulating.
Yeah, it's I think you really hit on something too, is you were saying you just keep being hopeful or optimistic that you don't need to raise that much money, that you can do it for a lower amount of money. And I cannot tell you how many people have gotten themselves into jams by not raising enough money on Kickstarter and then getting into it. And people come to me all the time, they're like, how did you figure out your number? Because that's the one thing we've never had a problem with running out of money for the project, because I build in, I do the financials for Monster Elementary, and I build in, a little room to have problems. And I also do all the complex formulas and calculations that I come up with to figure out, well, if we sell this many packages at this level, what's the cost for this tier versus the profit? You have to break all that stuff down. If you don't break all that stuff down, you're in major, major trouble. The worst thing you can do is build this network of people, because Kickstarter's not just about selling your product or raising the money to your product. It's also about building a network of people and bringing them into your world. And the worst thing you can do is take all that time and effort to bring these people into your world, and then at the end say, I have to cancel the product because I didn't raise enough money, and here's all your money back. Those people will never come back to you ever again. And it's better to not reach your goal and then try again than it is to reach your goal and then have to cancel the project. That's oh God. That's nightmares. That stuff keeps me up at night, man.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so all great stuff. I want to get into the top 5 tips that you guys have. We might have covered a couple of them, but this is for listeners who've not been listening to the other episodes. I have asked some awesome anthology creators to put a list of their 5 best tips or 5 pitfalls to avoid. Basically 5 things that they learned while creating an anthology project that they can bring to you. So do you want to start with your first one?
Sure. I've discovered, at least with our anthologies, that even page numbers is very important. If your stories should all have even page numbers, so that when you're putting the book together in the end and deciding on story order and how things are going to go, you don't run into all kinds of weird problems of, okay, now the splash page doesn't work, or, okay, now it just seems weird that I'm starting on this page. So it's, as a sort of the editing level, putting the book together, if all your stories have even page numbers, then you can move them around and, design the arc of the book itself.
Yeah, he's not saying that you can't have a mix of even and odd page stories if that's what's best for your anthology,
right.
But he's specifically referring to an incident in which we had like a 3-hour argument about how we were laying out the book, because structurally, for the second one specifically, the first book, he wrote all those stories with a very specific order in mind, because it was originally written for one artist to do it, and so he just kind of wrote it in order. The second book, he wrote all these different stories, and some of them needed to be in a certain order, and some of them didn't, and so we spent a 2-hour argument because we had 2 splash pages throughout the whole 90 pages, and there was no way that structurally the book could make sense where we could get the splash page on the right spot for the page turn. And we had to add a 1-page story last minute and ask an artist if he could draw it in 4 days to and so what Nick is referring to is you will make your job a lot easier if you work out all of that stuff well in advance before doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you can plan out every story in the order and how it's going to lay out in the book well from the beginning, but who's going to do that?
Oh, Nick. Nick.
Well, for my anthology also, there was people could have turned in a little bit less pages. So you may plan it out beforehand, but it might not necessarily work out. So I think that's great. I am for sure going to be doing 2 divisible by 2 next time after the headache of this one.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're doing something like what you're doing, where you're having just lots of different people contribute, not whatever they want, but their own stories. Some of them may already be created. Absolutely, you cannot go back in time and be like, hey, can you take a page off that? Can you add a page? You can't do that. But if you have that luxury, it's going to make your job a lot easier in the long run.
Well, I did have somebody who came and said, hey, my story's supposed to be on the right side and it's on the left side now. Can you flip stuff around? And I was like,
yeah.
So I'd find a 1-page story and move it to a thing, and I'm like, all right.
And then
next time, no. I'm just expecting people to look at the proof of the book when I send it out and be like, but my page, this is on the left side. It should be on the right side. It's on the right side. It should be on the left side. I'm just gonna be like, yep. Well, that's life.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be really flexible, too, when you're doing that stuff in anthologies. There were other stories in Volume 2 that we could have possibly benefited from having the pages, from left versus right, But, at some point we had to just decide that having the splash pages on the turn was the absolute most important part. So all other concerns, that was our first concern, was having the splash pages on the left side of the page. Of the book, and then the second concern was making sure that the stories were presented in the order that made the best narrative sense. Right. And then every other concern about left or right had to go by the wayside, because those 2 had to be our primary concerns.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, what's number 2?
All right, it's with your stories, it's about having a certain balance of diversity while maintaining the theme. Because when you have an anthology, you don't want all your stories to be the same. You don't want them to focus on the same characters. You want them all to have their own unique flavor and all be different. But at the same time, they still need to all fit the theme of the book and all work together. So it's for me, I think it's a very careful balance, and it's certainly one that Gwen and I have talked a lot about in creating the stories for our books.
Yeah, it's Nick has some great ideas for Volume 2s to revisit other characters that we had seen in Volume 1, but thematically, as an editor, I look at the script and I'm like, I don't understand. And that's horrible feedback to have to give a writer. I don't relish it in the slightest. But, there was one particular story that saw a villain character come back, and he didn't interact with any of the 5 main kids during his story. And my only note at the end of the story I wrote to him was, I don't understand why this story is in this book. And that's horrible feedback to have to give, but it's necessary feedback to have to give.
Honestly, it actually was really good feedback.
Oh, thank you. I felt horrible.
I wrote that story, and I was like I was having fun writing it. I was like, oh, this is weird. Oh, yeah. And then when I was done, I was like, oh, wait, this is weird. And so I just kind of slipped it to her to see what she'd say, because I didn't know if it was good or not. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's really important. You especially, I saw that stereotype in Nick a lot going off Volume 1 to Volume 2, where Volume 1, I gotta say, in my opinion, our storytelling is super tight on Volume 1. There's only stories that need to be there. There are through lines for characters that develop from, the first page to the end, that you don't need to know that in order to get enjoyment, but if you have read it in order, you get the little character development and things. In the second one, when he was submitting his scripts to me, I saw him go like way far out into the universe and back, and then way backwards, and then it was like, I have a second book, now I'm going to do everything that I want to do, and it's like, no.
Time to go nuts.
Yeah, bring it back, my friend. Bring it. What are we writing about? We are writing about these 5 kids and their feelings about not belonging. Every story has to be based on that, and if you're writing a story that's not based on that, there better be, can I say swear words on this podcast?
I've been saying it the whole time.
Okay.
So.
I've been paying attention to Russell's mouth.
I don't think I have. I'm a little sick, guys. I apologize. If you're not gonna write a story that's on that central theme, you better have a damn good reason why that story needs to exist in that book.
Is damn a curse word?
I don't know.
It was in the 1980s.
We are an all ages book, Russell. I've
know.
had to improve my filter over the years.
Yeah, no worries. So I love that. I love that we've been most everybody that I've talked to so far has talked about theme and making things on theme, but this is great to hear that carries over if you're going to do a Volume 2 or Volume 3, as opposed to just in one specific volume, where it's important, but it's also important if those themes are, like you said, belonging or whatever the theme is, that if that's what you've set up in the story, that it has to continue just like it would have to in, a graphic novel or novel.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the brilliant things. I mean, people can complain about spin-offs all they want in whatever medium they're talking about, but I think that's where you have a spin-off. If you want to go off theme with the same characters or one character or one plotline or whatever, then that's when a spin-off is appropriate, or a complementary volume or something. Explore that. Don't limit yourself from telling that story, but is that story right for the anthology you're doing in that moment?
Yeah.
Love it. All right, what's number 3?
All right. So the next one was a strong design for the book. I think that with an anthology, you have all kinds of different things happening inside the book. And, this goes back to maintaining that theme, is that the design of the book needs to tie it all together, and it needs to tell people what they're getting on the inside. Far more importantly than, any other book on the shelf, because, you see a Batman book, what's in the book. But when you're going for an anthology, you need a really cool cover, which the Monsters and Other Scary Shit book totally scored on.
You nailed that cover, man. Perfect.
But I think it's really important to have that design sense that, gives your book the unity that it's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the cover of your anthology, and I know exactly what I'm getting inside. It's a little scary, but it's not too scary. There's no gore. There's purple. It's a little dark, but the yellow eyes make it a little quirky. Like the tone of the cover you developed, I think, is absolutely perfect, And for our stuff on Monster Elementary, one of the nice things, for those who don't know, we got a publisher halfway through production on volume 2. So we had the luxury of going back to volume 1 and doing a different, different trade dress and doing a different back cover design and interiors and stuff, and really coming up with a theme across the 2 books. And, we went with a chalkboard theme for a lot of the text, like the table of contents, and on both covers, we have like class photos, and on the second book, because we are going beyond the school and we're telling stories, in different countries, we did like a passport theme on the back, and like our tagline is something about they're now an international incident or something. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but
kids from Monster Elementary are back, and this time it's an international incident.
Right. So, making sure that your design reflects the stories you're telling on the inside. And you never want a consumer to pick up the book. I mean, a great cover is great, but you don't want them to pick up the book and then flip through it and be like, oh, this isn't what I thought I was picking up. Yeah. Especially with an anthology when you're dealing with a lot of different artists, a lot of different themes, a lot of different storytelling. Finding a good design to tell the community, tell your reader what's inside can be really difficult. So It's not something to be taken lightly or to underestimate the importance of that, especially with an anthology.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you do see this. I always talk at shows, I'm like, how most indie comics like trick you with like an amazing cover and then the interior is kind of like garbage?
Yeah.
But like it's true across all like anthologies as well. Like, people don't like to be tricked. You can you can trick them into buying one time. But like once they're tricked one time, that's it. Like they won't come back. They will just be like, "Oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to get inside." Which I really appreciate you saying that about the cover, because 30 creative teams, and tonally from like cute to scary to sci-fi to like fantasy to like black and white to color. It was very difficult to find like something to tell Aaron, who is our cover artist, Aaron Alexevich, who draws Invader Zim, like how to make a thing. And then I was at the Broad and I saw this big like Murakami like print with all sorts of like faces, like small faces, big faces, and I was like, "Hey, Aaron, can you just like do this but with like a bunch of different monsters?" And like I've seen almost all of Aaron's work, and I have to say, I still think this is the best cover he's ever done.
I hope he loves it as much as the rest of us do, because, speaking of this goes back to on theme too. You didn't put just one monster on the cover. You put a billion monsters on the cover, which is what they're going to get on the inside of this book, is a whole mess of different types of monsters. And I'm just in awe of the vision of that cover because it's so perfectly spot on. I hate anthology covers. I have to tell you, I hate anthology covers where the cover artist is someone that did not even contribute art to the book. And not that, Alex, let me be very clear. I realize what I just said. Hold on, let me back up. Your cover works because it's a representation of the theme, which is one more artist inside the anthology and having 30 different. What I'm talking about is when you have like a traditional comic book cover that's one piece of art and it's like a poster image sort of situation, and that person didn't contribute to the anthology. Because then at that point, then I'm really questioning why that art exists in this world and what that has anything to do with the other stories that are on the inside of the cover. Like that bothers me intensely. When you have such a wealth of artists from the inside, and you're going to do a cover that's like a poster sort of image, you should be picking something from within the anthology. Again, I need to reinforce, that's not how I feel about your cover.
Yeah, so Aaron is not the cover artist.
I think that, I disagree with Gwen, because I think with an anthology is the time to actually have an artist that's not part of the interior, because it contributes to the anthology feel of it, and you can have someone come in and represent everything that's inside, as opposed to having one person do a cover that represents their story.
I love the fact that we're an hour and 2 minutes in and we're just now disagreeing with each other for the first time. No, it's good.
Yeah. But I hate it when it's a single issue and one artist did all of the interior, so why didn't they do the cover? Because that's not a representation of what's inside.
Right. I do think that we can all agree that the cover should be a representation of what is inside every book, but especially an anthology.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So what's the next one?
It's to finish big. I think with our two books, we've always had, you know, the biggest, the most important, the most emotionally impactful story at the end. And I think that, you know, one thing maybe people forget a lot with an anthology is that there still should be some sort of an arc to the whole thing. Even if, you know, none of the stories have anything to do with each other, you still kind of want to feel that arc, and you want to finish big at the end. You want to have the catharsis still.
Right. We, you know, our first volume, and this also plays into everything we've already talked about design and not tricking your audience. And, you know, so for the first book, we just called it Monster Elementary, because if it was the only book that was ever going to exist of these characters, you know, that's the name, Monster Elementary. And then we realized for the second volumes, we were going to have to figure out the volumes after some sort of structure. And when we decided on Monster Elementary and the Egyptian Curse for, you know, a specific story in the book called the Egyptian Curse, you know, we just realized that if we're going to call the volume the Egyptian Curse, that needs to be the emotional crux. That needs to be the big story. And then we had a conversation where Nick thought it would be in the middle of the book because structurally that's where he wanted it. And we had another argument where I was like, you can't call it And the Egyptian Curse and have this story be the culmination of the whole book. You can't do that. Like, that should be your last. The Egyptian Curse should be the last most important story with the most plot development and the most character development, and that should be at the end. And I think especially in an anthology, that's so important to have your big, strong, most impactful. It doesn't have to be the best story, because I would never say any of my artists are better than the rest of them. With, you know, but you want that story that's going to leave the people feeling that for a long time. You want that to be the last thing they read when they read your book, because you want that to be you want that to be what they walk away with and thinking about for a future volume.
Yep. Agree.
Yes, I would caveat that by saying it should be whatever emotion that you want them to get away with. So for me, the anthology, I wanted them, after all of this sort of like action and all this other stuff and like sad and happy, I wanted to kind of leave like feeling whimsical, which is why we went with like Angela Fullard's story, because it's very like childlike wonder and whimsy, and like I was like, this is the nice, after all this like violence and like jokes and all this stuff, like having a nice like palate cleanser to like remember the whimsy of life is like, that's how I wanted people to feel when they walked away from the anthology.
That's so accurate, and I completely agree with you 150%. Yeah, if you don't want them walked away disgusted with gore and blood, then don't have that be your, like, you know, it's perfect. And I love what you said, too. It's almost as if that story sounds like an epilogue, in a way, a sort of summing up of their experience so far.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Okay, so, last one. I think last one.
And we did kind of touch on it earlier, but for me, the most important thing is to have unique artists and different styles, and just bring in really great people that do different things, because the fun of an anthology is opening it up and seeing something different every, 1 to 12 pages.
Right. I agree wholeheartedly. If you're going to go with a traditional comic style with every story, there's no point in making it an anthology. No. Make sure that it's an anthology for a reason.
Yeah, I love comics. I mean, I write comics because I love comic book art. Right, I write it so that people will draw my stories, and so when I look at a comic book, what I want to see is that really awesome art, and I want to see different stuff. I want to see unique stuff. I want to enjoy what's different and unique and special.
Yeah, for sure. I love that as your last one, especially based on the anthology that we're doing together, which is all sorts of different styles, and it's one of the things that I was worried about doing the book, because like I have artists who are like work for DC and like Simpsons, and other ones who've like never been published before, and ones who work like super indie. And as I was putting the book together, I was kind of nervous as some of like the bigger like names that I know were like coming back and saying, well, you should cut this story because it's not like the style's not like super comic book, like professional comic book art, or like it doesn't fit. And then I would talk to other people, and they'd be like, no, these ones are my favorite stories, and you should cut these other ones because they're like super professional, and like who cares about that? And like that is what I love, is like if you are super professional, if you like super professional stuff when you pick up an anthology, and then like there's some more like weird avant-garde stuff in there, you're like you can maybe like push your limits to like a little bit more avant-garde, and if you're more avant-garde and you see like professional art and you're like, oh, this is also cool, maybe it like reopens you up to something that you didn't necessarily like think about before you open the anthology.
Yeah, I think people overestimate the importance of it having to look like everything else that's being put out there. Like if you open our book, we have some people that are like super comic booky looking in their stories. We also have, one Nick's contributor or Nick's collaborator on your Monsters anthology, Daniela Serra. He does a watercolor paint style and a painter style to his stuff, and we have that in our book, which most people would be like, why would you put that in a book for kids? But I got to tell you, no one cares. No one cares. I mean, let me be much more clear than that. We care because it's beautiful. It's beautiful work. But I mean, the kids read it and they don't go, well, that looks painterly, so I'm going to skip that story. Or, it doesn't...
This guy would never work on Superman, so I'm 4 more pages ahead.
Yeah, like, they just care. People want to see the characters they love doing interesting things, and how, yes, you want people who are good artists, but what good artist means can vary greatly depending on your perception. This isn't about comic books in general, but something that stuck with me my entire life was I played Snoopy in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown way back when I was in high school. It was my last show I did as a senior in high school. And I wore a white tracksuit and black dance sneakers, and I had very long hair then that was in pigtails. And I wore regular stage makeup, but the only bit of character makeup I would argue that I had was I put a little black dot on my nose. That was the only thing that we had a reference to that I was supposed to look like a dog on stage. And I would meet kids after the performance, and they would call me Snoopy. They would call me by Snoopy's name and ask for pictures with Snoopy, and they'd ask me to do the Snoopy dance. And we would do talkbacks with elementary schools, and they were always just so excited to see Snoopy. I mean, I didn't look like the Knott's Berry Farm Snoopy that walks around in that costume, but to them, I was Snoopy. And there was another actress that I did the show with who was very... she had the same costume I did, obviously same choreography, same songs. We were double cast. And all the kids could say after a performance was, where's the black dot on your stomach? Where, why isn't Woodstock with you? And they asked her all these questions. And the only thing I can think of is that when she performed, they didn't see Snoopy. And I'm not saying this to down her in any way, but, when they saw me perform, they saw Snoopy. So as long as people see the character in what you're doing, the visuals are important. They sell books. It's part of marketing. But people put way too much stock in what they think a professional comic book should look like. Mm. That's my anecdote, and that anecdote has stuck with me my entire creative career. The visuals are important, but if you tell the story, if you present them with the character making choices they believe the character would make, you're halfway home, if not almost all the way home.
Yeah, and professional art is a very subjective thing at the end of the day. Anyway, to go back, to go back to when I was at the Broad, like the shit that was hung there, man, was a wide range of stuff. Like some of it was like the stuff I was talking about. Then there was like an oversized chair, which was also there, and like an oversized dinner set. And there was like just something that was painted like a canvas that was painted green, and all of those things were good enough to be hung in this gallery.
Right.
They were wildly different. And if I had to say what I love about anthologies, and overall, is you get in a way that you really can't in just having a comic book. Like if I don't like a comic book style, like I'm just not going to buy it. But with an anthology, it's like, all right, like what is this? 8 pages? All right, cool. I'm gonna try this thing and see if I like it. And I've gone from like not really liking a style to going and picking up somebody's book because of something I saw in like a 4-page anthology. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool and weird and different. So like it really allows me at least to like open my brain to things I may not normally like.
Yeah, we tell kids all the time at the book, like if they pick up the book and the first page that they open, they don't seem to respond to, I'll be like, oh, what kind of, like, what do you like? What do you like? And then I'll open them up to the page in the anthology I think they like, or I'll just simply say, hey, why don't you flip a few pages ahead? It's a different artist. Like you don't, that's the brilliant thing about anthologies too, is that you may discover someone you like, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just don't like that art style. But that one art style is only going to be a certain number of pages in that book, and you flip ahead, and you're going to find someone that you love.
Yep.
For sure. Okay, 2 final questions, and then we'll get out of here. It's really one question in 2 parts, which is, you're going to start an anthology project tomorrow. What is the one thing you will absolutely do, and one thing you would never do again?
Oh, good questions.
I would absolutely find all the artists that I love. You know, that's, for me, there's no point in doing an anthology if you're not bringing in all those great people. So that's always the first thing. It's like, hey, are you available? How many pages? Hey, are you available? How many pages?
Yeah, don't get scared to ask. The worst thing that happens if you ask is someone says no. I mean, we had Stan Sakai submit a print for our Kickstarter campaign, our Volume 2 Kickstarter campaign, and you don't get those type of people to work with if you don't ask. So never, ever be afraid to ask, ever. And there are very, very well-known professionals that, again, shall remain nameless, that Nick asks every volume. I mean, we've only done 2, but he plans on asking them for a 3, and they're very polite with him, and they say, not right now, too busy, you know, they have their reasons, but Nick will ask them every anthology, and probably till the day he dies, to work with them.
And I'll say this one, because I don't think it's any big secret, but every time I see Don Rosa, I ask him if he'll do a cover. And he tells me that he quit the business, he doesn't do it anymore, and he'll tell me that every time. But I'm going to ask him every time I see him, because I love Don Rosa, I love his artwork, and if he ever changes his mind and says, you know what, maybe I do want to do a little more art, I want to be the first guy that asks him if he wants to do it when he does have that change of mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to be fearless.
Yep.
And with Stan Sakai, it was just an email. You know what I mean? You'll send out 1 million emails to people that are too busy and too successful to email you back, but one of them is going to be Stan Sakai, and he's a really nice guy, and he's going to say,
so nice.
He's going to say, you know what? I think I have time. He said, if you don't need it by, you know, whatever, he needed a few months. He said, if you don't need it till then, we can talk.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, is for everybody, for all the people out there that don't want to support the little guy, that don't make efforts to help indies, etc., you're going to find someone like Stan Sakai that wants the indie world to be huge and large, and he wants to help as many people as possible to do that. So, and you're never going to meet those people if you don't ask.
Yep, for sure. I feel the same way about like when I talk. That's why I talk to every person at a show, because you don't know. Like, you might get 100 or 1,000 rejections, but all you need is a couple of people to say yes to like have a good show, or like to have a good Kickstarter launch, or to like want to be in your anthology. And it's really, if you focus on those people and just understand, like, in order to find those people, I have to talk to a lot of motherfucking people. You know, you'll like when I made that realization, like, my life drastically changed, because it didn't become about like, oh, 99 people hate this, or they're not here for indie comics. It became about like, dude, I found 40 people to buy my book. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Like, who cares if I had to talk to 4,000 people? Like, I found 40 people that will buy my book. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how you have to think about it. You can't focus on the people that aren't interested. You have to take all of that and consider it a win. I mean, you know, I ask myself a lot of times, you know, we have 2 books out. You know, we have a publisher now. We're looking at we're trying to find other ways to bring these monsters to more kids and more people in general who like them. But the thing I always have to keep reminding myself is I'm already 95% further down this road than most people will ever get. And yeah, you have to be willing to put aside all the negative and focus on the positive, which does include, the 95% of people that hang up on you. Focus on the 5 that don't.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard math. Like, do something cool and just talk to a bunch of people until like a few of them get behind you.
Right.
So, all right, do you have a thing that you would never do again?
Hard to never say never,
Yeah.
especially in the arts.
Or a thing that
Not our instinct.
like a thing that you learned, like a pitfall that you would avoid, like for sure. Like
I'm sure
I would never not use Google Forms to fill out my submissions again because it was a nightmare this time that I did it.
That's funny.
Like using Google Forms for your artists to submit?
Yeah, when I submitted things, I just said email, get in touch with me, and like I got emails, I got like Facebook messages, I got all sorts of like ways to submit, and I had to then like parse all that stuff out in like an easily usable format for me.
Right. So you're sorry, I thought you were like talking after you already selected artists. You're talking about if you want to be in this anthology, fill out this form. Yeah.
If you want to be in this anthology, because like I didn't have any of that this time. I was just like going by the seat of my pants, and it drove me insane.
Keeping track of all that data. Ooh.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I may have like missed some people. I don't know, but like I would definitely have it in like a Google submission form. So do you have something like that you learned that you would avoid?
My big lesson that I learned is even numbered stories, even numbered pages. That was my big lesson.
Nick really did not enjoy that conversation we had.
It was like we're already working with our publisher. We're getting ready to send all the files to print. It was like I have to write a 1-page story, and we have to talk to our artist and hope that he's available to get it done in 4 days.
To be fair, though, that's one of my favorite stories in the book.
It was a challenge, and we rose to it, I think, and it came out better for it. Yeah. But the lesson I learned is even numbered stories, page numbers.
I'm trying to think what. Okay, so this is something that I've been meaning to do in time for Volume 3. So on the first book, because a lot of the characters and the story, other than the main 5 kids, a lot of characters and the locations in the stories, the artists were creating out of their own heads for the first time. On the second book, I had, especially my artists that were new to the property for the second book, wanted reference images of locations that had already been established and characters that had already been established. And in my head, I was like, oh, fuck. Of course I should have done some sort of reference book. We were building a world with, at that point, after Volume 2, 10 different artists had worked on, so that's definitely something. If you're doing an anthology where you're working with the same characters and the same locations across the board, yeah, man, you need to have that stuff. I was like just quickly screen capping stuff and sending JPEGs to my artists, which they're very nice and kind and cordial, and that was good enough. Literally was good enough. That's all they needed. But yeah, I really need to make sure I have a reference Bible by the time Volume 3 comes around, because it's not fair to them for me to be sending them random JPEGs every 2 days.
And, that a lot of that with Volume 1 as well, before you really started getting heavy into the book, I had artists that were working on the same characters but hadn't seen each other's art yet because the book wasn't even published yet.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, passing art around, which, on the first volume, obviously it's a necessity, but beyond that, you can start putting those things together.
Yeah.
Being organized.
Yeah, be as organized for your artists as you possibly can. They're working hard enough for you at, indie comics page rates. So
I like that that's the name for it.
I've decided. I came up with it at the very beginning of this podcast, and that's what I'm going to call it. Make things as easy for them as humanly possible. And there are definitely things I could have done to have made it easier for them, like having the reference Bible set up, or, instead of trying to get them to sign forms halfway through doing their art, having that all ready to go,
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
Awesome. All right. So this is coming out right before WonderCon. You guys are going to be at WonderCon, right?
We are.
We
absolutely.
are. We're going to be in the small press area. Did we get booth numbers yet, Russell? I think we did.
I don't know. I don't have it on me, but like probably. I don't know mine. But more importantly, we are doing Phoenix together in the same booth this year.
That's right.
I definitely don't have a booth number for that, but whether you're at WonderCon this weekend or you're heading down to Phoenix, you can check us both out. That's pretty cool. This is the first time I'm doing a big boy booth.
It's a whole different experience. I mean, we've only ever shared a big boy booth with someone else, but it's a whole, corner spaces are great. We're going to have a big corner space at Phoenix, and I'm really, really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. I guess I was in someone else's booth at San Diego once, but like this is the first one like I set up, I paid for, is my booth with you, and I'm super excited. So before we get out of here, give me one parting piece of advice and how we can find you online, and then we'll get out of here.
All right. Parting piece of advice, have fun, because none of this is at all worth doing if you don't do it to have fun.
Absolutely.
You're not going to make any money.
That's not true. That's actually exactly where I was going to go, is just keep a positive outlook the whole time. You're going to experience 1.5 million setbacks. And if you let any of those derail your vision, you're dead in the water. Just focus on the accomplishments believe in yourself and keep moving forward. Don't take people's no's. You have to take some no's seriously, but don't let the no stop you from doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. And how can we find you guys online?
MonsterElementary.com, Facebook /Monster Elementary. On Twitter, we're at Monster Elem.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
That's it. Those are the big ones.
Let's get some more.
We don't have any more.
Well, next time you'll have an Instagram and Pinterest and all those other ones.
We could do a whole podcast about how do you do an Instagram when you're not an artist. I would love. You should do. In fact, I don't want to be on that podcast. I want to listen to that podcast.
Ooh, I can do that because I am not an artist, and I do have an Instagram that has all of the has 11,000 followers on it, almost 12,000. So like
pretty
not an insignificant number.
Nope.
Not at all.
So that's there you go. Okay, so we just came up with another episode that I'm going to have to do in the future. And at that, I think thank you guys so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So that was Nicholas Doan and Gwendolyn Dreyer from Monster Elementary, currently being published by Space Goat Productions. If you liked that, please head on over to Twitter, Facebook, or their site and tell them how much you enjoyed the episode. You can also check out Nick's writing in my new anthology, Monsters and Other Scary Shit, which is on Kickstarter right now. So head on over to monsteranthologycomic.com if you love monsters as much as me, Nick, and Gwen do. And that's it, wannabes and creators. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. And I will see you next time.